Okay, welcome back. Now we've created some materials and a material instance for the AR, and we need to make sure that the AR is getting updated just like its distant cousin, the SMG. Now, the reason we're not seeing this update is because if we go back to our item.cpp on construction function, we'll see that we are setting the dynamic material instance here, and we get our item mesh and we set the material equal to the dynamic material instance that we create based on the material instance variable. So not only do we need to update the material instance in on construction based on the weapon type, we also need to take a look at this material index. Remember, when we set a material, we use a material index, and for the Bellica guns, that material index was 4. Let's take a look at a weapon that uses the Bellica guns mesh. In the materials, we use element 4 for the material. Now, for the AR, it's a little different. For the assault rifle, there are 2 elements, and the assault rifle needs to use element 1. So this material index also needs to change as soon as we change the weapon type. So we're going to add a couple of properties to our data table. So let's go ahead and go into our weapon data table, and we're going to add a couple of things here. We're going to add a material instance, and the type for that is uMaterialInstance, and that's a pointer. We're going to add this. So let's copy this here and add to weapon.h. Here in fWeaponDataTable, we're going to add a uMaterialInstance pointer called MaterialInstance, and we're going to make this edit anywhere blueprint read write. Now we also need an int32 called MaterialIndex, and this will also be edit anywhere blueprint read write. Now we're going to compile this so we can set it in the data table for both of the weapon types. But while that's compiling, we can continue to take care of using this in C++. Now recall in item.cpp, we're setting the dynamic material instance here equal to what's returned by this create function, which takes a material instance. But we need to change this material instance depending on the weapon type. We're also setting vector parameter value here. Now that's fine that we're setting this here in the item class, but we'd also like to set this in the weapon class. So we'll have it set here for all items, but if the item is a weapon, then we can set it again after changing this material instance. So let's go ahead and go into weapon.cpp and go to on construction. And here in on construction, we're going to set our material instance. So since we're going to be setting the material instance here, we need a public setter for material instance, because material instance is a private variable. So let's make a setter for this. So we'll go down to the bottom here, and we'll make a setter. It's going to be force inline void set material instance, and it's going to take a uMaterialInstance pointer called instance, and we'll simply set material instance equal to instance. And it looks like I'm missing an N there, typing too fast. So make sure that's spelled correctly. And now we have a material instance setter. So the first thing we'll do in the weapon on construction function is we'll set the material instance. So we're going to say set material instance, and we're going to get weapon data row, and we're going to get the material instance. So now we'll have our material instance set. Now, since we're going to be setting our material instance, we need to change our dynamic material instance. So let's go into item.cpp. So we're going to actually call all this code again in the weapon on construction function. Now, since we're going to be accessing material instance, we also need a public getter for the material instance. So let's create another force inline function. It's going to return a uMaterialInstance, and that's a pointer, and this is going to be getMaterialInstance. This will be const, and it's going to return material instance. So we can go back into item.cpp and copy this if material instance check with its code where we set the dynamic material instance, and we can go into weapon.cpp just after the weapon data row, and we can paste it here. Now, since material instance is a private variable, we need to use get material instance, the public getter that we just created. Now we're going to copy this, and we're going to use it when we set the dynamic material instance right here. Now, of course, dynamic material instance is also private, so we need to create a getter and a setter for dynamic material instance as well. So in item.h, I'm just going to copy the getter and setter for material instance and paste it here. And instead of set material instance, it's going to be set dynamic material instance. So we're just adding the word dynamic there. And the type is material instance dynamic. So material instance dynamic. And we're simply setting the dynamic material instance variable. For the getter, it's going to return material instance dynamic, and it's going to be called get dynamic material instance, and it's going to return dynamic material instance. So we just created a getter and setter for dynamic material instance. So in weapon.cpp, we're going to use set dynamic material instance here, and we'll just need parentheses, and we'll pass in the result from this create function. Now here we need to get dynamic material instance. So there we're getting it. And for item mesh, we need to use get item mesh. That way we can get item mesh. And we're setting the item mesh material to the dynamic material instance. So this needs to be get dynamic material instance here. And finally, we're passing in glow color and material index, and both of these are also private. So we need to add getters for glow color and material index as well. So let's go ahead and create those in item.h. So we'll add a force inline. And for glow color, it's going to be f linear color. It's going to be called get glow color. It's going to be const, and it will return glow color. And also we need a getter for material index. So it's going to be force inline. It's going to be an int 32, and it's going to be called get material index. It'll be const, and it will return material index. That was also a variable we already had, and it's private. So in weapon.cpp, we can pass in get glow color. And for material index, we can pass in get material index. So now on construction, if we go ahead and change our weapon type, then we're getting the material instance from the data table based on the row of that type. And then we're going to get our material instance and set the dynamic material instance based on our new material instance. We're going to set the Fresnel color, and we're going to set the material using that material index and the dynamic material instance. Now, in addition to setting the material instance variable, we also want to set the material index. So we're going to also create a setter for material index, and it looks like I forgot the return keyword here. So return material index in that getter. We're also going to create a setter. So force inline void set material index, and this will take an int32 called index, and we will go ahead and set material index equal to this index. And we can set that in weapon.cpp as well. So just under setting the instance, we're going to call set material index as well. And this is going to be weapon data row material index. So now we should update our material index also. We can go ahead and compile this, And then we need to set these variables in the data table so they'll be updated properly. So we're back in the editor, and I wasn't seeing my new properties in the data table, so I closed out of Unreal Engine, opened it back up, and I was unable to open the data table. There was an issue when adding a new element, so I had to actually delete the data table and create a new one, and I wasn't able to use the same name. So I had to create a new data table based on weapon data table, and I called it weapon data instead of weapon data table. Now, since I created a new data table, I had to right click and copy the reference, and back here in the onConstruction function where we're referencing the data table's path, I had to paste that new path in here. So that's why I have a data table called weapon data instead of weapon data table now. Now I also had to add the table rows and set the properties again. So if you run into the same issue, no worries, just create a new data table and copy that reference and get that path updated for your F string in onConstruction for the path. Now with Submachine Gun selected, I can scroll down and see the material instance and material index. And for Submachine Gun, the material instance we're going to choose is SMG mat inst, and the material index will be 4. And for Assault Rifle, the material instance will be AR mat inst, and the material index will be 1. As we saw when we looked at the Assault Rifle mesh, in the details panel, the material index we're interested in is 1. So go ahead and save that. Okay, so that takes care of setting the material instance and the new material index, and we're almost done. There's one thing we need to take into account though. You see, each time we switch to a different weapon type, we're setting the material instance and we're setting the material at a particular material index. Now this index may be different from weapon to weapon. On the SMG, the material index is 4, and on the AR, the material index is 1. So if we switch from, say, the AR to the SMG, then we still have a material that we set at index 1. So what we need to do is we need to store the previous material index so that way we can clear that material whenever we set a new material. So we're going to go into weapon.h and we're going to add a private integer. It's going to be an int32, and we can call this previous material index. And that way we'll keep a record of the last material index whenever we change it. So in weapon.cpp, as we're setting the material index here, before we set it, we need to store the last material index. And so we're going to say previous material index is equal, we're going to set it equal to the get material index. And that way we're getting the index, we're storing it in previous material index, and then we're setting it equal to the new index from the weapon data table. Now, in addition to storing that previous material index, we also need to clear out that material. We need to set that material to null. So we're going to call get item mesh, set material, and we're going to clear the material at this index. It's going to be the previous material index, and we're just going to simply set it to null pointer. And that way, that material at this previous index will be cleared out, and we'll set the material at the new material index that is dictated by the data table. So let's go ahead and compile this, and we'll hop back into the editor and we'll test this out. So here we have a weapon. I am searching for weapon in the weapon BP details panel, and I'm going to switch it from machine gun to assault rifle, and we get the assault rifle. And if you look, you can see that the glow material is the appropriate color. That Fresnel color is the appropriate color. And we can switch back to submachine gun, and we get the submachine gun. I'm going to switch it to assault rifle, and I'm going to go ahead and play, and I'm going to make sure that we're getting that pulse, and there's the pulse. The pulse is working just fine. So also we have a pulse when we interp, so I'm going to pick it up and see if it flashes before our eyes. And there it is. So that's going to conclude this video. We now have the ability to change the weapon type enum and change properties, including our new AR material, which we created an instance from, and it blends between the material functions for the glow material and the AR material function. So this is looking pretty good. Now, what happens when we try to use this assault rifle? Let's go ahead and try to pick it up. And let's switch to it. Now it looks like we're actually holding the assault rifle. But if you actually look at the hands by hitting Shift F1 to get our mouse cursor and going and possess or eject player, that way we'll eject, we can take a look and we'll see that her hand is not quite in the right location. It's trying to hold the spot where it holds on the SMG. The hand should be up here. We're going to fix that by setting the location to the right spot on the gun by using something called inverse kinematics. We're going to do that in a future video. But for now, we're going to go ahead and conclude this. We'll take care of things pertaining to the new weapon very soon. So we'll see you in the next video.